guys, and welcome to this video where I am somewhat briefly deconstructing and analyzing some of the insights that I can get from the Libra full moon chart. So if you're interested in some of the energies that we can see in this chart and what this could mean for us over the weeks to come, definitely stay tuned and let's get into it. This Libra full moon, this is the chart for the Libra full moon. Happening over San Francisco, California. But essentially, the rising sign will be different in different parts of the world, obviously. But this is the chart for the full moon, and we have this full moon at 18 degrees of Libra, with the sun at 18 degrees of Aries. You can see down here that we have this really powerful stellium with Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars, and also Pallas Athene is sandwiched in here as well. She's an asteroid. I do like to incorporate the asteroids in some of my astrological work because they are given to more feminine energies. So this one is Athena, the goddess Athena is associated with the asteroid Pallas Athene. And I like to incorporate those because I think it gives you more of a balanced perspective of masculine and feminine energies that we have in our solar system, because they are in our solar system. So that's why I include those. But so we have Pluto with Jupiter still going on. We've got Pallas Athene, we've got Saturn, we've got Mars. All in the later degrees of Capricorn and the early degrees of Aquarius in the case of Saturn and Mars. And the, I guess, problematic energies that have to do with this full moon is that the moon is actually squaring Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn. It's more of a wider square at that point, not necessarily squaring Saturn. It's actually having just trined Saturn actually earlier in the degrees of Libra, but it is squaring Pluto and Jupiter, so that is a little bit more of a difficult energy. We have a lot of cardinal signs emphasized in this chart. So we've got obviously the moon in Libra, which is a cardinal sign. We've got the sun in Aries, along with Chiron as well. And we have Pluto and Jupiter squaring or in square to the moon in Capricorn. So this is definitely an energy of a little bit of tension. Any full moon is going to be an opposition between the sun and moon, so that's not something that I read as kind of like more challenging, although it can bring out, when we have a full super moon, which is, this is a full super pink moon, when we have that going on, it's definitely going to be impactful in terms of society. Like we could see a little bit more heightened emotional states going on, which obviously that has been happening for a while with the events of COVID-19 and just the ways that these events have changed our lives globally on the planet. So it's to be expected, I guess, that when we have the moon moving to an opposition with the sun, typically full moons, particularly super moons, are associated with heightened emotional states, among everyone. And that's why you all hear sometimes about that police, remarking that they sometimes want to have more people working on the force when there are when there's a full moon, or when emergency room workers claim that they tend to be a lot more busy with taking emergency patients on full moons. So full moons definitely do have a history, colloquial and sort of verifiable via data, history of affecting people on the planet through sort of heightening emotional states. And I've seen this myself with different full moons that I've watched, what's going on, what the crime rate is doing in the country that I live in, which is the United States. I will look at data for that on particular full moons or during astrological events that I'm just curious about, and when I can get information about that, or when I can get a general sense based on things that are going on that I can read about, in news, for example. I'll often try and see, what I can get that seems to be, and whether or not it is actually correlated with the astrological phenomena that's happening at the time. So definitely there's a sense of, the potential for heightened emotional states at the full moon. But this one with the moon squaring Pluto, it's not exact, but it's applying. And so the moon is at 18 degrees of Libra, and it's applying to square Pluto, which is at 24 of Capricorn. So an applying aspect in a mundane chart like this can show that a tension that is developing, because it's a square, a tension that is developing is likely to increase a little bit. We have about 6 degrees to go between the time that where the moon is now and when it goes exact. So that's definitely a potential that we could see is a slight rise in tensions or an emotional reactivity over the next several days because of, again, the symbology of the applying aspect of the moon applying to square Pluto. The other interesting thing here that I want to point out is the nodal axis, which we have the North Node in Cancer up at the top of the chart, and we have the South Node down here in Capricorn. And what I get with this is actually that if you notice Chiron, it's kind of hard to see, but Chiron is the asteroid that has to do with healing, also wounds, and kind of Chiron in mythology was the centaur who was an incredible healer and taught the other gods and mortals the art of healing with herbs and with natural remedies, but he could never heal himself. He had an unhealable magical wound that he received when he was shot with a magical or a cursed kind of arrow by some rowdy centaurs. There's like some drama going on in the mythology, and he was sort of a innocent bystander, came in to try and keep the peace, and then was wounded in the process, and he had to live with this kind of long-term unhealable wound. So the asteroid Chiron is at 6 degrees of Aries in this chart, and Chiron is at the bendings. So what this is the bendings is the kind of halfway point. It's the square point between the nodes. It's the furthest point that the moon can go to before she starts to kind of curve towards the other node, if that makes sense. So the bendings and the nodes are the maximum elongation points of the moon, and that's really all you need to know about it. But to understand this, what we get is the potential for some kind of volatility when it comes to healing. We could see, because Chiron is also conjoined with true black moon Lilith, which is not a planet or an asteroid, but actually a mathematical point of calculation in the moon's relative distance between the moon and the Earth. So what we get here with true black moon Lilith and Chiron and Mercury then in Pisces and Neptune, it almost seems like over the next week or so we could see a rise in some kind of unexpected healing modalities for not only this virus, but for healing anything that we have as a species that is kind of an unhealable wound, if that makes sense. I see, because true black moon Lilith is symbolic of kind of like the wild side of the feminine. She was in, the Bible, of course, the woman who was made before Eve and who was cast out of Eden because she was not, what's the word? She wasn't willing to concede to Adam's desires or Adam's kind of role in her life. Like she was more desirous of things like unto herself. And I'm obviously abridging the story and leaving out a ton of detail, but basically she was cast out because of her wild streak. Essentially, she was cast out because of her unwillingness to kind of fall into line. And then so Eve was created out of Adam's rib. And the symbolism, or I guess like the description of that, whether or not you prescribe to the Bible or beliefs of the Bible, but the concept is that because she was made from the bone and the body of Adam, that she was more inclined to be the partner that would allow him to be the way that he wanted the relationship to be, basically. So true black moon Lilith in astrology kind of points to the wild side of not only women but also men. It's the connectedness to nature that has been sort of bred out of us as we've become civilized, as we've become much more kind of predictable and orderly, and the ways that we have modified our behavior to fit common narratives, the way that we kind of have established this sort of order, which is civilization. True black moon Lilith represents like what is outside of that, right? Because Lilith was cast out of Eden. So it's like that unconscious, very wild, very nature-based origin of humanity that isn't necessarily conducive to the way and the order of the civilization and the way that civilization has sort of changed human nature. But we've never been able to completely breed that out of human beings. So I think that true black moon Lilith is a really great way to like reading that symbolism in a chart is a great way to bring that kind of more wild side, that wild identification with nature, that chaotic consciousness back into the chart. And sort of in that way, we're sort of rehabilitating or reabsorbing that kind of wildness back into our psyche. And the fact that it's here with Chiron in the part of fortune in Aries, we've got this sense of a potential kind of wild streak or a potential wild card. And because it's Chiron with true black moon Lilith, it could be healing, some kind of herbal treatment or something having to do with nature, natural cures, our ability to heal ourselves as well. And not even necessarily speaking only about the virus, but also this is an opportunity for all of us to heal ourselves emotionally, to heal ourselves psychologically and mentally as well. So the part of fortune being there definitely helps me to see that there is the potential for something positive with this. And also with Chiron being the healer, doesn't necessarily point to an easy healing or something that will be like predictable over time. This could be something that we see presented maybe as individuals in our own lives around this full moon, and over the next week following, we could find different aspects of nature or aspects of our own lives that would help us heal ourselves across multiple levels and multiple spectrums. But we could also see as a collective there being some alternative ideas being presented about what can be done to support humanity at this time. And some of those ideas may be more nature-based or may be kind of relative to the concepts that were related to the idea of Lilith and what we've sort of cast off. I really love the phrase from the one of Bob Marley's songs, and it's actually originally from the Bible, about the head cornerstone always being the one that the builder will refuse. And I think that that really sums up this full moon in my mind. It's like the stone that the builder refuses. What that really means is the conscious mind or the dominant narrative is saying, no, don't look at this. This isn't where the solution is. The solution lies in the system, or the solution lies in, this scientific method, or, which is great. By the way, obviously there's nothing wrong with the scientific method, but when you are doggedly and stubbornly cutting out ideas that are alternative views or that represent alternative viewpoints to the dominantly accepted scientific narrative, and you're automatically shutting those down, that actually becomes not very scientific, right? Because you're not really testing theories or, laying credence to anything that you don't have a particular awareness of or knowledge of, but you're just sort of shutting it down immediately. That's not a very scientific way of going about things. And we see that all the time with natural cures and things that people are doing that are free or very inexpensive or locally available or available in their local environment, like such as herbs and nature and even breathing exercises with the Wim Hof method. These things are kind of categorically given a lot of skepticism from the scientific community or from the more, I guess, capitalistic nature of the healthcare system. These things that are kind of more widely available and that people give people some kind of sovereignty and some ability to do certain things for themselves are being in more or less ways kind of shut down before their true validity and credence has been absorbed and observed. And part of that obviously is for financial reasons, because people don't necessarily want to fund studies, which cost millions of dollars sometimes, if they're not going to be able to patent something that is the result of the study, or if they're not going to be able to make a lot of money off of it. Obviously, there's not going to be a big market for investing in that kind of research. So in spite of those issues, though, we could see some improvement coming of this full moon. And again, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm not saying that it's going to be a smooth ride. There could definitely be ups and downs with this, but with Mercury and Neptune, we definitely get that sense of alternative ideas. And with Mercury having separated from Neptune, it could be also that these ideas have been generated already, for example, and they're beginning to gain traction. And perhaps as Mercury crosses the border into Aries, we could start to see more of those ideas really gaining traction and really starting to become part of the dominant collective narrative or the dominant collective questioning, right? It's just attention being brought to something that has heretofore been kind of either automatically shot down by the established medical system or the established systems that we have going. Or it could be just something that more and more people are talking about, and so systems, have to begin to look into it because we don't have any other options, right? So again, I feel like I'm talking mainly and in a large way about health when I'm looking at this chart, because that is such a big topic on our planet right now, is really how we can be healthy, how we can strive to have a healthy society, have a healthy global population, but also not just physical health, right? It's also about psychological health, mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health. So I do feel that we are in very, very challenging times. Obviously, when we look at the astrology, we don't have to look all that far to see that. Anytime you have a Saturn Mars conjunction, that's going to be rough. It's one of the main significating aspects between Mars and Saturn that is really associated with like hardcore challenges. They're the two malefic planets in traditional astrology, so anytime that you have those two in cahoots, there's usually some kind of difficulty going on. But I do think that in spite of the tensions and in spite of the difficulties that we're facing at this time astrologically and in practical terms on planet Earth, I do feel hopeful about this Chiron Lilith, part of fortune, and then the Mercury and Neptune. Now, these things are definitely not mainstream because, again, Mercury is in fall and in detriment in Pisces, which means that the quality of this communication or the quality of this potential solution is going to be very, very counterculture. There could be something that's very, very off the beaten path and definitely not part of the mainstream about this. But with Chiron, it does, seem to me that there is something really good-willed behind it. if you're going to look in mythology for a mythic figure that represents kind of like pure goodwill towards others and towards humanity, it would definitely be Chiron. Let's just leave it at that. So when you've got Chiron at the bendings, which is, squaring the nodal axis, you do see, again, volatility with anything at the bendings, but that's a significant point. That's a power point in this chart, and Chiron's there, which is about healing, and it's about natural healing, and it's about self-healing, and about going with the energies of the moment, going with the wisdom as well of the past, going with the wisdom of, traditional medicine and what has been passed down through generations, what is folk medicine, or what is known to be healing that humans have been doing forever, that we know can make at least some kind of a difference. I'm not saying we're going to be throwing out the pharmaceutical industry or advancements that have been made in emergency care or allopathic medicine by any means, but I do see that there is the potential for a significant and respectable return to glory or return to reverence of natural-based methods of healing, as well as sovereignty when it comes to a person's personal choices about their healthcare and how they manage their health. So those are my thoughts on this astrology. Obviously, there's so much more that we could talk about. There's so many things in this chart that are important to look at, but just in the interest of time, I will hop off now, but I hope that this has been useful or interesting to you, and I'm sending you lots of love. Stay safe and take care, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.